Carp fishing to me is a passion I've had since I was about 16 years old. I've been into fishing all my life really, since I was a little toddler, but it's an escape from all the stresses of life. It's something I just love doing. I've been really fortunate in the 20 odd years that I've actually got back into proper carping, what I'd call like serious carping. I've been really lucky. I think I've had 46 different 40s now in the UK. I've had 6 50s, 5 of them different ones. Even though I've had a passion for fishing all my life, I think I really got the bug for carp fishing, or wanting to do carp fishing, from about the age of 16. I used to go fishing over the North Met, which is in Cheshunt, which was just over the back of my school. There was Turnford School, and then there was the pits where we used to run around like doing our cross country. And I used to go fishing over there, night fishing, when I should have been revising for my exams when I was about 16 years old. Me and my mates used to go over there float fishing for tench, and we'd be sitting there watching our starlight all night long when we should have been revising. The next day we'd go in for exams. We'd be up all night because we'd catch a few tench, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. And then we'd hide the rods in the bushes, literally take a bag of school clothes, go into school absolutely knackered, smelling of fish. And that was it. That's why I flunked my exams basically, but it got me into the passion for fishing for big fish. I heard there was carp in this place and I couldn't wait to start fishing for them. I did sometimes put out a rod on the North Met for carp, never had any luck. I tried some Stansted Abbott's pits. I was useless, I never caught a bloody thing to be honest in the carp fishing wise, but I did have the odd tench, I had the odd bream, went for all the other species. I was quite good at catching everything but carp, but I couldn't catch carp to save my life. But as I started looking into magazines, looking into videos, getting a passion for it more, when I was 16, I had all my gear nicked and I basically lost interest for it. I was living with my grandparents. My nan died. I got into watching football. I went around the country watching Arsenal. I got into darts, playing darts, and I totally forgot about fishing. Well, not forgot about it. It was always in the back of my mind, but I had a 12-year break. I come back into fishing in 1998, the year I got married, when I see a cousin at a wedding in Cambridge. So my cousin from Cambridge took me fishing. We had a little match on the river. I think I caught a chub, about a 2-pound chub, and it just got the passion going again. I thought, I'm going to do this carp fishing properly this time and catch one of these things. So I started watching videos again, getting Carp Talk magazine, seeing big fish in Carp Talk. The main place what kept popping up was Darenth, and I thought, I've got to fish at Darenth place. I kept seeing massive fish coming from Darenth. So I eventually done some inquiries. I got a ticket on Darenth, and that's where it all began. My first 30 from there was a 36 common. That went on, I caught quite a few 20s, 30s and 40s, from 20s and 30s from different day ticket waters and doubles and things as well. But the 30s and 40s started coming from Darenth. I had a cracking season, my last season on Darenth, after about 4 years. I was lucky enough to have had 4 50s that year, and I think about 5 or 6 40s. It was like just a mad year. Then kids come along. I had a boy, so again I had another 3-year break. I went back into carp fishing. I went back on Darenth, which was a mistake. I went back to a water I'd already done all right on. It was okay. I had a couple of repeat captures, but I learned from there. Like I've always thought since then, don't go back. So that's one thing I've sort of taught myself. Don't go back to a water. Look, if I've done all right on it, move away. As much as I loved it, move on. So from there I went to Monk's Pit, done all right at Monk's Pit. I was learning more by then. It was weedy, it was a different challenge. I was lucky enough to have some of the big ones in Monk's Pit as well. When I first went on Monk's Pit, I wasn't too daunted by it size-wise. It was a sort of size lake I was used to after Darenth, and the sort of size I was comfortable with really. About 16 to 18 acres, whatever it was. Normally sort of 80 to a maximum of 100 yards cast. But the weed looked scary. Darenth didn't have too much weed. Monk's Pit was full of it. You could see kelp weed up to the top. There was Canadian, you name it, every type of weed going, it seemed there was in there. And I thought the be all and end all on there would be to use a bait boat, like probably 90% of the anglers on there was using. So I bought myself a bait boat. And to be honest, my results with that were useless. I'd be plonking it out in the middle of the lake, thinking where fish were showing, thinking I'll surely get a bite, but it was looking, with hindsight, it was like poor angling, because I was just dumping it in amongst weed without finding me spots. And I remember Mick, the owner, coming round one day after about 5 or 6 sessions of me not doing very well. And he said, "Can I help you?" And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm using a boat, I'm doing this." He said, "Stop there." He said, "Why don't you try without the boat?" So, you know, after the success I had on Darenth, I thought, what am I doing using something I'm not comfortable with? I'm not knocking boats, but I just weren't comfortable. I'm not a good bait boat angler. So the bait boat got sold. I started feeling for me spots, feeling the lead down, PVAing everything up when I cast, big leads, and my results started changing. Not fishing the spots where everyone's fishing with the boats and the echo sounders in the little holes. Started fishing short, fishing in little areas that people are not really fishing, and then the success come. And along with that came, again, 40s started coming, the known fish, started chalking off the names off me wish list, so to speak. There's a list of 40s near the gate at Monk's Pit, all the known fish, and sort of gradually going through them was lovely, just trying to knock them off. The main thing I was after when I left Darenth, the one thing I hadn't had was a 40 plus common, so that was my real ambition from Monk's Pit, to get a 40 pound common. There was one in there, the big common from Monk's, normally went between 44 and 47 roughly. That's the one I was after, and eventually I got that one, so that was my highlight of my Monk's days, definitely. I think it was about my second season on Monk's. It had got to, it was about August or September, so it was coming into real big fish, sort of not an easier time of the year, but a time when you're more likely to catch more fish. I'd started getting through some of the named fish, quarter linear and black spot I'd had a couple of times. Black spot was one of me, not a pet, but it was one of them fish that I just kept catching. It was, sometimes you get a big fish and you just keep getting repeats, and luckily for me that was one I had a couple of times. It was a great fish, but I really wanted a common. I was starting to think, am I going to get this or not? But I think it was a September. I think it was a September fish, the big common. It was a cloudy, overcast, low pressure, windy. Just, it always used to kick off on Monk's when it was windy, and it just felt right. I was in my favourite swim, the Christmas trees. I'd really got to know a spot out there. I used to bait it the same every time, fishing between, I'm going to give away a little secret if everyone wants to fish on there, but it was 2 poplar trees. It was 18 wraps out, bait between the 2 trees, fish right in the middle of it, just beyond, bait beyond me, hook bait. And they just seemed to come round about 3 in the morning, was an absolute banker. And lo and behold, it was about 3 o'clock in the morning, it went off. And yeah, that was an absolute, one of the best moments of my carp fishing career, I'd say. To get that fish, it's probably one of the best I've ever had. Yeah, I got nighttime pictures of it. I'd love to have got it again in the day, but can't win them all. It was just a real classic moment, really something I'll never forget. That fish went 46.2, which smashed my common PB. Well, smashed it. I had my first 40 common was from a little syndicate, Lakelands, which was a low 40, but that I thought, I'm not going to beat that for quite a while. I don't know where to go to beat that common, so it was a case of sitting back and just enjoying myself after that. There was still a few I wanted to go for. I still hadn't had the big one, which is called Porky, just a mirror, which goes over 50 in Monk's. So I still wanted to get that. There was still a couple of other big fish I wanted to go for, and over the next year or two I did eventually get through them. I seem to have all the known ones apart from Porky, but when it got to the stage I was getting more repeats, it was time to say goodbye to Monk's and just so be it. If I'm not going to get Porky, I'm not going to get it. It was time to move on. I think when it comes to moving on from a syndicate or big fish water and repeats and the subject of repeats, I think sometimes you need a cut-off point. You know, there was some fish like that black spot. It's a great fish. It's a lot of people's dream fish. It now goes over 50 pound. And you know, I just got lucky with that fish. But to catch it 3 times, it don't do nothing for you. And it's smashing someone else's dream if they want to catch that fish. And if I stayed on there and I caught that another 2 times, does that make me look as if, like, oh, look at me, I can keep catching black spot and you can't, but I can't catch the others? It just don't seem to make sense to me. There was other fish I doubled up on, Artford fish, quarter linear tail, some of the bigger ones. Yeah, I couldn't catch porky, I couldn't catch a fully scaled in there either. But when I'm after 2 fish and on my second or third time round on others, about 15 with a fish called Kinky, which was a 32, but that's another story. Sometimes I just think it's time to move on. I think it's common courtesy, and I don't know about some people, it just don't do it for me. Catching repeat captures, it's not always the best, whatever size they are, unless it breaks a magical barrier. If you've had a fish at 35 and then you repeat it a couple of years later maybe and it's gone 41, sometimes that's a bit special, but other than that, a repeat, it don't always do it for you. I've been really fortunate in the 20 odd years that I've actually got back into proper carping, what I'd call like serious carping, in the amount of big fish I've had. That's why I've got back into real big fish hunting. I can't help loving catching big fish. I've been really lucky. I think I've had 46 different 40s now in the UK. I've had 6 50s, 5 of them different ones. As I say, 4 from Darenth, but I repeated on 1. Then infamous home fen, I've had 1. People knock the place, but it's a fantastic place to fish for big fish. I just love big fish. A big fish from the Dell, a 50. And I put it mainly down to venue choice. Venue choice for me is massive. I'm self-employed. Every time I go fishing, I'm losing money. So I don't do long sessions more than about 48 hours most of the time, because I'm losing money when I'm fishing. So I don't, the big pits like 100 acres plus and all that, they're not really for me, because I don't want to be blanking, to be honest. Every time I go, I want to catch, because I'm losing money when I do go. So I've tried Glen Faber, which is like 120 odd acres, and it hardly had any fish in there. I've tried the North Met. I had a winter ticket on the North Met. I loved going back to North Met to try and break that duck of catching a carp after my days of missing exams catching tench. I did get me winter carp. It was £36. That for me was like, job done. I don't want to stay here blanking anymore. I had about 10 blanks before I caught that. That was enough for me. I thought it's not really for me having 9 blanks to catch 1 fish. So I started concentrating on them monks type waters. Did 15 to 20 odd acre waters are perfect. Sometimes I go to small waters. Lakelands was small, Rosemere. I'm on Myth's Pool today. It's a fantastic little water. I like the small waters as well as the medium sort of size, I would say. And what you call the circuit waters, fairly heavily stocked, lots of big fish. It's just what suits me. Most of the time I'm thinking I'm going to catch rather than blank. So venue choice is massive when it comes to catching these big fish. But it's about getting everything right. You need to be getting your rigs right, I think, getting on a decent bait, and then there's a whole minefield of tactics. There's little things. I try and fish different to everyone else. Otherwise you're going to catch the same as everyone else's. I fish away from pressure rather than go where everyone's going, because that's where the fish are showing. Like I've come to see for myself, they don't always feed where they show. You want to be going really, but the big fish are often well away from where all them little ones are showing. That was often the case on Monk's Pit, Darenth, and most of the places I've been. Big fish swims, I found big fish tend to come out of the same swims all the time. Most places I've had the biggest fish in a lake, I've had the 2nd, 3rd and 4th biggest fish that I've caught from that lake have come from the same swim so many times. It's too many times for it to just be a freak sort of thing. So I've concentrated on the same swims a lot of the time. Some people, I think, on syndicates have probably seen me as like, oh, he only ever fishes them same 2 or 3 swims, but they're right. I like to try and master a swim and be good at them swims and try and get in them as much as I can, rather than fish a load of swims badly, if that makes sense. That's just the way I do it. And if I can't get in them swims, then I'll try the other ones. Sometimes it pays off. The Dell last year, or the year before last, I had my first 50 from my first Dell 50. I couldn't get in the swims I'd been fishing, so I was forced to go up the far end, called the field bank. I'd never fished it before. I thought, oh, I have to go all the way up the other end, push my barra. I'm getting on a bit, I'm nearly 50, I don't want to be pushing my barra up the far end. But I went up there, forced into a place I didn't really want to go. I had a 50. Next time I went back there, I think I had a 42, It's my favourite swim now, I love it. I was forced into going to swim, I didn't want to go in, and it's a real big fish swim, so don't tell anyone. Catching some of these big carp though is not all down to like angling skill, I must admit. There's one or two fish, one in particular in my album. It's a 42-pound mirror what I caught from Monk's Pit, known as the Hertford fish. That was definitely caught by luck more than judgment. I fished in a chat room swim at Monk's Pit. It was a swim that done me my first 40, a fish called slopeback, where I fished in open water in there, trying to be a bit different from most people. Fished over to the reeds, where a lot of fish used to hang about in the reeds, but used to do a lot of small fish over there. So I fished in the open water and did have a big fish once, like slopeback. So often I'd go in there and fish 2 in open water, in amongst the kelp, hoping for like another big fish, and sometimes that'd work, most of the time it wouldn't. And then I'd have 1 on the reeds, which I'd almost call me banker rod, but it'd normally be a double or a 20 or even a single, but it'd normally go off, so that was like a blank saver rod normally. Anyway, there was one occasion I got a take on that rod, a slow take. It weeded me up, more like reeded me up. It went into the reeds and the weed in there. It was absolutely solid, it got stuck. So with Monk's Pit, there's boats in most swims, you can use a boat. So it was life jacket on, got the oars, jumped in the boat, and I like to keep a tight line on any fish I'm ever like playing, especially from a boat, and especially in Monk's Pit when it's all weedy. I like, if you slacken off a bit, you're more likely going to lose it. So as I'm tightening up, I went to get my net. Because I'm tight onto the fish, I look round and I'm drifting away from the bank, and I thought I couldn't reach the net. If I went back for it, I'd be loosening up. So I thought, I'll go out there anyway, I'll think of something. So I went out there like an idiot without a net. I got about 3/4 the way to the fish, thinking there's a bloke marking the other swim, he'll be able to chuck me his net. But like near where the fish was weeded up in the plateau. But I got as far as him and I realised it was, the fish had buried itself into the reeds. It was further around from the plateau than I expected. So as I shouted to Mark, can you chuck me your net? He said, I can't chuck it about 30 yards, like he's not a javelin thrower. So he couldn't get me the net to me. He didn't have a boat in his swim. So I had my phone in my pocket. I had to ring my mate, Dave Smedley, over. He was on the far side in the point, and he had to row all the way across. He probably still cursed me for this. He rowed all the way across with his life jacket on, with a spare net, and he bailed me out. He passed me the net, and luckily enough there was this big fat mirror sitting in the reeds, good as gold, and I just got the net under it, and it was a 42-pound one called a Hertford fish that was well up there on my wish list. So that was about as jammy as I'll ever get, I think, catching a fish. One thing about fishing for big fish on these big circuit waters, especially for people who are quite new to carp fishing, you are going to come across like what you call big name anglers, and you could be quite intimidated. All I would say is just don't be. Everyone is just human. I was very intimidated. My first big fish syndicate, as I say, was Darenth. I went on there. Some of my sort of childhood heroes, what I looked at in the magazines. He won't thank me for it actually, because he's probably similar age, but people like Rob Marsh, Rob Tuff was on there. Names I'd seen all the time in the magazines with these massive fish. And every time I was over them, people like that was on there. John Claydon, certain names, Derek Ritchie, the nutter, was on there. People like, I was intimidated. I felt under pressure every time they was there. But once you start catching, that soon goes. And even if you don't catch, most of the time they'll help you. They won't mock you. They're just other anglers. You just talk to them, they're fine. I soon got over that. As soon as I moved to Monk's Pit, and my confidence was up anyway, you bump into, it's going to be the biggest name dropping ever, but you bump into people like Dave Lane, Ian McMillan was on there, Darryl Peck, every name under the sun. There's fish like places like Monk's Pit. You soon become immune to being nervous. You even go along, you talk to cameras with people, stars like Lee Morris behind the camera. It's unbelievable, and you're not even scared anymore. It's nothing to worry about. You don't need to be intimidated. So just go and talk to these people. They're normally very friendly. Some are, some ain't. If they're not, just ignore them. But there's no need to be intimidated by anyone in carp fishing. They shouldn't make you feel like that. No one should. Although I've spoke about the use of a bait boat sort of hindering me fishing, I've got to say it's probably gone against me as well, not using one, and my stubbornness to not use one after a while probably cost me the chance, I would say, of catching the biggest fish in the lake at Monk's Bit, because that fish porky, I'm not saying everyone caught it with a bait boat, but probably in the 7 or 8 times I see it come out on me 4 or 5 years I was there, it must have been 5 or 6 times it come out to literally a boatload of food. It was often from a certain swim, the double point, right out in amongst the weed, in a little hole in the weed, which was often found with an echo sounder and a bait boat. I think my stubbornness to not use a bait boat went against me there, and it's a regret. And to be honest, I would use a boat in that sort of situation had I gone back there again just to try and catch that fish. I don't think there's any harm in that. I think you've got to move with the times. I use one in France. I don't think nothing of it using it in France, so I use one at home fen if I go there. So I've got nothing against them. I just think sometimes your stubbornness can get in the way. It's just fishing. It doesn't matter really. If it's allowed, it's not cheating, I don't think. So yeah, I think it's not bad angling to not use it and not catch it, but it's a regret. I think if ever I'm going to pick a fish where I could have done more to catch it and I made a mistake, that was it, not using a boat to catch porky. If there's one water I'd love to have fished in its prime, it's probably just somewhere like Redmire, just a small historic lake, like loads of history. I mean, I could say places like Raisbury as well, any place with a big record fish, Coninbrook, some of the places I missed out on. But to be honest, I've picked the type of lakes what suit my angling and fished the lakes I want to fish. So I can't really complain. I can't say there's too many lakes I'd love to have fished anyway, so I've not really got any regrets on that score. But if there's one lake I think I would love to have fished just through looking at the old Dick Walker videos and things, I think it'd be Redmire, just for the sheer history of the place. If I could give one bit of advice to anyone sort of either getting into carp fishing or who's already carp fishing, wants to progress into big carp fishing, like trying to catch 40s, 50s, etc. I think it'd be just to do your own thing, not be pressured by all social media and bad advice, just taking note of what everyone else is saying and thinking that's got to be the thing. Just do your own thing, you know, pick your own swims, trust your own judgment, keep to your own, you know, if your rigs work, stick with them, pick a bait that works and stick with it. Just do your own thing, do whatever you're comfortable in. If you think, don't go in different swims just because you feel like you have to. If you feel like sticking to your same swim, if that's available, then do it. If you want to fish a certain lake, if it's got foreign fish in it but you want to fish it, don't be pressured what everyone else says, it's all wrong, and take the notice. If you want to enjoy your fishing, if whatever makes you happy, just do it. Basically, do whatever makes you happy. If you're not happy carp fishing, take up golf.